November 15, 1966, four people racing down a dark road at 100 miles per hour. Something massive with glowing red eyes chasing their car from the sky. 13 months later, a bridge packed with Christmas shoppers collapsed into a freezing river, killing 46 people, and the creature vanished forever. Was the Mothman trying to warn Point Pleasant? Or was it waiting for everyone to die? Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was just after midnight when Roger Scarberry turned his car onto the old access road leading to the TNT area. His wife Linda sat beside him in the front seat. In the back were their friends, Steve and Mary Mallette. They were young, bored, looking for something to do on a Tuesday night in a small town where nothing ever happened. The TNT area was a good place to drive around and talk. It was quiet out there, dark, private. The TNT area got its name from World War II. Back then, the government built a huge factory there to make explosives. Massive concrete domes held the TNT powder. Bunkers, storage buildings, railroad tracks. At its peak, thousands of people worked there. But the war ended. The factory closed. By 1966, it was abandoned. The buildings were falling apart. Rust covered the metal. Weeds grew through the cracked pavement. The only thing left were the empty structures and the silence. Roger drove slowly past the old generator plant. The headlights cut through the darkness, lighting up the broken windows and peeling paint. That's when Linda saw it. She grabbed Roger's arm and pointed. There, standing near the entrance to the plant, was something huge. At first, she thought it was a man, but it was too tall. Way too tall. 7 feet, maybe more. It was gray, the color of dirty concrete, and it had wings. Not small wings like a bird. These wings were folded against its back, but even folded they looked massive. Then it turned its head toward the car. Its eyes glowed red, not reflecting the headlights. Actually glowing. 2 perfect circles of bright red light, like someone had put burning coals in its eye sockets. The eyes didn't blink. They just stared. Linda screamed. Roger hit the gas pedal and the car jerked forward, tires spitting gravel as they raced back toward the main road. Steve and Mary saw it too. Steve was looking out the back window when the thing moved. It didn't walk. It unfolded those wings, 10 feet across, maybe wider. Then it lifted off the ground. No running start, no flapping. It just rose into the air like something was pulling it up on invisible strings. And then it followed them. Roger pushed the car faster. 40 miles per hour, 50, 60. He turned onto Route 62, the main road back to town. The engine screamed, 70 miles per hour, 80. He looked in the rearview mirror. The thing was still there, gliding above the road behind them, wings barely moving. It wasn't struggling to keep up. It looked easy for it, effortless, 90 miles per hour. The car shook. Linda was crying. Mary was praying. Steve kept watching out the back window, his face white. 100 miles per hour. Roger had never driven that fast in his life. His hands were shaking on the wheel. They passed dark fields and empty houses. No other cars on the road. Just them and the thing chasing them through the night. Then, as they reached the city limits of Point Pleasant, it was gone. Roger looked in the mirror. Nothing. Just empty road and darkness. He slowed down, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Finally, Roger said they needed to tell the police. Right now. They drove straight to the Mason County Courthouse. It was almost 1 in the morning. Deputy Millard Halstead was on duty. Roger and the others rushed inside, talking over each other, trying to explain what they'd seen. A giant bird. No, not a bird. A man with wings, eyes that glowed red. It chased them. It flew over 100 miles per hour. Most deputies would have laughed them off, sent them home, told them to sleep it off. But Halstead didn't do that. He looked at their faces. They were terrified, really terrified. Not drunk, not joking. He asked them questions. What time? Where exactly? How big? What color? He wrote it all down. Then he did something that surprised them. He said he'd go look. Halstead drove back to the TNT area that same night. He took his flashlight and walked around the old generator plant where they'd first seen it. He checked the ground for footprints. He looked up at the roof. He listened. Nothing. Just wind moving through the broken buildings and the sound of his own footsteps on the gravel. Whatever had been there was gone now. But Halstead believed something had scared those 4 people. He could see it in their eyes. The next morning, the story hit the newspaper. The Point Pleasant Register ran it on the front page. A reporter named Mary Heyer had heard about it from the police scanner. She interviewed Roger and Linda. She talked to the Mallets. She wrote it all down, every detail. The creature, the chase, the glowing red eyes. And at the newspaper office, a copy editor came up with a name for the creature. He'd just seen a movie about Batman. He changed 1 letter. The Mothman. By afternoon, everyone in Point Pleasant was talking about it. The Mothman. Some people laughed. Some people called Roger and Linda liars. But some people believed them. And a few people admitted they'd seen strange things out by the TNT area too. Lights in the sky. Shadows that moved wrong. Sounds that didn't make sense. The official explanation came quickly. Too quickly. A wildlife expert told the newspaper it was probably a sandhill crane. Big bird. Sometimes stands over 4 feet tall. Maybe it had looked bigger in the dark. Maybe the eyes were just reflecting light. Mass hysteria, some people said. 4 young people scared themselves in a spooky place at night. But there were problems with that explanation. Sandhill cranes don't grow to 7 feet tall. They don't have glowing red eyes that shine like headlights. They can't fly 100 miles per hour. Their top speed is about 30. And they don't chase cars. They run away from loud noises and engines. Roger Scarberry had grown up hunting. He knew what birds looked like. This wasn't a bird. It was something else. Over the next few days, more reports came in. A couple driving near the TNT area saw something huge fly over their car. A farmer heard strange noises near his barn and found his dog dead in the morning, no marks on it. A woman named Marcella Bennett went to visit friends who lived near the old plant. She got out of her car holding her baby. She looked toward the field. Something was standing there, gray, tall, watching her. She couldn't move. Her legs wouldn't work. The thing walked toward her, not fast, just steady. She finally broke free from whatever was holding her and ran to the car. She dropped her baby. She picked the baby up. She threw herself into the car and locked the doors. The thing came up to the window and stood there. Just stood there, looking at her with those burning red eyes. She said later that the eyes talked to her, not with words, but she felt something. terror, deep, heavy terror that filled her chest and made her feel like she was drowning. Point Pleasant had been a quiet town, normal. People worked at the power plant or in the stores downtown. They went to church on Sunday. They knew their neighbors. Nothing strange ever happened there. But now something had changed. Something had broken. The safe, normal world had cracked open, and people could see through the crack to something else. Something they didn't understand and didn't want to understand. The police logged the reports. They wrote down names and dates and descriptions. But they didn't investigate. Not really. There was no task force, no search parties. They just wrote it down and filed it away. And the sightings kept coming. November 16th, November 24th, November 25th. Different people, different locations, same description. Gray, tall, wings, red eyes, always near the TNT area, always at night. By the end of November, more than a dozen people had seen it, and all of them said the same thing. This wasn't an animal, this was something that shouldn't exist, something wrong. And it was watching Point Pleasant, waiting for something, but nobody knew what. In the days and weeks after that first sighting, Point Pleasant changed. People started locking their doors at night. Parents told their children to stay away from the TNT area. The local radio station got calls every day from people reporting strange things, lights in the sky, shadows moving across fields, dogs barking at nothing. The sightings came in clusters. Some nights, 3 or 4 people would see the Mothman. Other nights, nothing. But it always came back. And it was always the same. 7 feet tall, gray or brownish gray. Wings that stretched 10 feet or more when it opened them. And those eyes. Everyone talked about the eyes. Red, glowing, unblinking. Eyes that looked into you, not at you. On November 16th, just one day after Roger and Linda's encounter, a man named Merle Partridge was sitting in his living room watching television. He lived near the TNT area, a few miles outside of town. It was late, almost dark. Suddenly, his television went crazy. The picture rolled and twisted. Static filled the screen. Then his dog, a big German shepherd named Bandit, started howling. Not barking, howling. A long, terrible sound like the dog was in pain. Merle went outside to see what was wrong. Bandit was in the yard, staring toward the barn. The hair on the dog's back was standing straight up. Merle looked where the dog was looking. He saw 2 red lights near the barn. Not moving, just shining. Like eyes. He called Bandit to come inside. The dog wouldn't move. It just stood there, shaking and staring at those lights. Merle went to bed that night feeling uneasy. The next morning, Bandit was gone. Merle searched for days. He walked the fields. He called and called. The dog never came back. Merle said he knew what happened. Those red eyes took his dog. On November 24th, 4 men were at the local National Guard armory near the TNT area. They were outside talking when one of them looked up at the roof. Something was standing there, something big. It had the shape of a man, but larger. Before they could get a better look, it spread enormous wings and took off. It flew away toward the river, wings moving in slow, powerful beats. The very next day, November 25th, a shoe salesman named Thomas Urey was driving down Route 62. It was afternoon, still light out. He saw something standing in a field beside the road. At first, he thought it was a man. Then he realized it was too big to be a man. He slowed his car down to get a better look. That was a mistake. The thing turned toward him. Red eyes locked onto the car. Then it opened its wings and came straight at him. Thomas hit the gas pedal. The creature rose into the air and followed him down the highway. Thomas was doing 75 miles per hour. The thing kept up easily, flying right alongside the car, matching his speed perfectly. Thomas looked over and saw it clearly through the window. Wings pumping, eyes burning, face like a man, but wrong somehow. Not quite human. Thomas made it to town, and the creature peeled away, disappearing over the trees. Later, he told police something that stuck with everyone who heard it. He said the Mothman wasn't curious about him. It wasn't scared of the car. It was hunting, chasing him like a wolf chases a rabbit. The police didn't know what to do. Deputy Halstead took the reports seriously. He believed people were seeing something real. But what could he do? Put out an arrest warrant for a flying creature? Other officers laughed about it. They called it a joke, just people seeing, things, getting spooked by shadows and owls. But the reports kept coming, and they were detailed, too detailed. People described the same thing over and over. The height, the wingspan, the color of the eyes, the way it moved. If it was mass hysteria, everyone was having the exact same hallucination. Then the outsiders started arriving, reporters from other cities, curiosity seekers, and one man who would change everything. His name was John Keel. Keel was a journalist from New York. He'd written about strange things before, UFOs, unexplained events. He heard about the Mothman sightings and thought it would make a good magazine article. He came to Point Pleasant in late 1966, planning to stay a few days. He ended up staying more than a year. What Keel found disturbed him. The Mothman sightings were just the beginning. Once he started digging, he discovered that Point Pleasant was experiencing a wave of strangeness that went far beyond a winged creature. People reported seeing UFOs hovering over the TNT area, bright lights that moved in impossible patterns, orbs that followed cars down dark roads. Stranger still, people reported strange phone calls, voices that sounded mechanical, messages that made no sense. Some people said their phones rang in the middle of the night, and when they answered, there was just static and a low humming sound. One woman said a voice on her phone told her things about her life that nobody else knew. Private things, family secrets. Then there were the dreams. Dozens of people told Keel they were having nightmares about disaster, water, metal, death. A woman named Connie Carpenter had a dream that stuck with her. She saw Christmas presents floating in the Ohio River. She couldn't explain where the dream came from or what it meant. She told her friends about it weeks before the bridge collapse. When it happened, when those presents actually did float in the river, pulled from the trunks of cars that had plunged into the water, she couldn't speak for days. Keel interviewed everyone he could find, witnesses, police officers, town officials. The more he learned, the less sense it made. This wasn't just a monster sighting. It was something bigger, something that felt planned, organized, like Point Pleasant had been chosen for something. The most disturbing interview Keel conducted was with a man named Woodrow Derenberger. On November 2nd, 1966, 2 weeks before the first Mothman sighting, Derenberger was driving home from work on Interstate 77. It was evening, just getting dark. A dark vehicle pulled up alongside him and forced him to stop. A man got out. He was tall, wearing dark clothes. He smiled at Derenberger. A wide, strange smile. The man said his name was Indrid Cold. He asked Derenberger questions about Point Pleasant, about the town, about the people who lived there. But here's the strange part. Derenberger said the man didn't speak out loud. The voice was inside his head. Telepathy. Cold told him that he and others like him were interested in Point Pleasant. He said there would be a time of great sorrow coming. Then he got back in his vehicle and drove away. Derenberger told this story to anyone who would listen. Most people thought he'd lost his mind. His wife left him. His neighbors avoided him. But Keel believed him. Or at least, Keel believed that Derenberger believed it. And the timing was impossible to ignore. 2 weeks before the Mothman appeared, someone or something warned about sorrow coming to Point Pleasant. By mid-1967, the town was divided. Some people wanted the whole thing to go away. They were tired of reporters, tired of jokes, tired of being known as the Mothman town. Other people were scared, really scared. They'd seen things they couldn't explain. They knew something was wrong, and a few people were angry that nobody was taking this seriously, angry that the police weren't protecting them, angry that the government wasn't investigating. Witnesses started getting harassed. Phone calls in the middle of the night, threatening letters. People drove past their houses, yelling insults. Some witnesses stopped talking to reporters. They just wanted to be left alone. But the sightings didn't stop. Through the winter and into the spring and summer of 1967, people kept seeing the Mothman near the TNT area, along Route 62, and more near the Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge was Point Pleasant's connection to Ohio. It stretched across the Ohio River, connecting West Virginia to the town of Gallipolis on the other side. Built in 1928, it was a suspension bridge, held up by huge metal chains. Thousands of people crossed it every day, going to work, going shopping, going to visit family. It was old, but it seemed solid. Nobody worried about the bridge. It had been there for almost 40 years. But in the last months of 1967, several people reported seeing the Mothman on or near the bridge. A couple driving across at night saw something large and dark perched on one of the towers. They said it watched them pass, then flew away down the river. Another witness walking near the riverbank said she saw glowing red eyes staring at her from underneath the bridge. She left immediately and never went back. Nobody put these sightings in an official report. They were just stories, rumors, more Mothman talk. The police didn't investigate. The bridge inspectors didn't check those areas. Everyone was so used to the Mothman stories by then that nobody took them seriously anymore. On December 15th, 1967, at 5 minutes past 5 in the evening, during rush hour, the Silver Bridge collapsed. The main eye-bar in the suspension chain, corroded from 40 years of stress and weather, snapped. The entire bridge fell into the Ohio River in less than a minute. Cars, trucks, a tractor trailer, and dozens of Christmas shoppers plunged into the freezing water. 46 people died. 9 bodies were never recovered. And after that moment, after the bridge fell and the screaming stopped and the rescue divers started pulling bodies from the river, nobody in Point Pleasant ever saw the Mothman again. The hours after the bridge collapse were chaos. People ran to the riverbank. Some jumped into the water, trying to save people. The water was freezing, 39 degrees, cold enough to kill in minutes. Cars floated for a moment, then sank. Drivers and passengers clawed at windows, trying to escape. Some made it out, most didn't. Emergency crews arrived fast, but there wasn't much they could do. The bridge was completely gone. Twisted metal and concrete lay in the water. Cars were buried under the wreckage. Rescue divers went down again and again, pulling bodies from vehicles trapped on the river bottom. Some of the bodies they found were still buckled in their seatbelts, still clutching Christmas presents they'd just bought. By midnight, the official count was 26 confirmed dead. But people were still missing. Still, families gathered at the police station with pictures of mothers, fathers, children, asking if anyone had seen them. The count rose, 30, 35, 40. Some bodies floated downriver and were found days later, miles away. Some were never found at all. Point Pleasant went silent. Stores closed. Church bells rang. People gathered in living rooms and held each other. This was the worst disaster in the town's history. Everyone knew someone who died. Everyone. The federal government sent investigators immediately. The National Transportation Safety Board, the Army Corps of Engineers. They needed to know what happened, why the bridge failed, whether other bridges were at risk. They pulled pieces of the bridge from the river. They studied the metal. They measured and tested and analyzed. 3 months later, the official report was released. The cause of the collapse was a single eye bar in the suspension chain on the Ohio side of the bridge. Eye bar 330. It had developed a tiny crack, invisible to inspectors, that grew over time. On December 15th, the crack reached critical size. The eye bar snapped. The chain failed. The bridge fell. It was a structural failure caused by metal fatigue and corrosion. Tragic, but explainable. Nobody was criminally responsible. The bridge was old. Sometimes old things break. The report was clear and final. Case closed. But the people of Point Pleasant didn't feel like the case was closed, because the federal investigators never mentioned the Mothman, not once, not a single reference to the sightings, not a single interview with the witnesses who'd seen it near the bridge. And those witnesses refused to stay quiet. 2 men who'd driven across the bridge 4 days before it collapsed said they saw something dark and massive perched on top of the Ohio Tower. It was December 11th, evening, almost dark. They both saw it clearly, wings folded against its back, watching the traffic below. They'd told the police wrote it down. But the federal investigators never followed up. On December 14th, 1 day before the collapse, a woman walking her dog near the riverbank stopped suddenly. Her dog started barking at the bridge. She looked up. Under the bridge, in the shadows of the support structure, she saw 2 glowing red circles, eyes, staring at her. She grabbed her dog and ran. She told her husband that night. He told her not to tell anyone else, or people would think she was crazy. Now she came forward. She gave her name to reporters. She said the Mothman was there, right before it happened, watching, waiting. John Keel was still in Point Pleasant when the bridge fell. He'd been there for over a year, collecting stories, interviewing witnesses, trying to make sense of the Mothman phenomenon. When he heard about the collapse, he felt sick. He'd talked to dozens of people who said they'd had dreams about disaster, about water, and death. He documented their warnings. And now, it had happened. Keel started asking questions that made people uncomfortable. He wanted to know why so many people had premonitions, why the Mothman appeared for 13 months and then vanished the moment the bridge fell. What the connection was. He didn't have answers, but he refused to accept that it was all coincidence. In 1975, Keel published a book called The Mothman Prophecies. In it, he laid out everything he'd learned. He wrote that the Mothman wasn't a creature. It was something else, something that existed outside normal reality. He called it a herald, a thing that appears before disaster, not to cause it, but to witness it, to feed on the fear and chaos. He wrote that Point Pleasant had been marked, chosen, and the bridge collapse was the event everything had been building toward. Most scientists and skeptics dismissed Keel's book. They said it was paranoid nonsense, connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. The bridge fell because of a corroded eye bar. That's it, nothing supernatural, nothing unexplainable. But the witnesses didn't care what the skeptics said. They knew what they'd seen, they knew what they'd felt, and they knew the Mothman was connected to the bridge somehow. They just couldn't prove it. Then a darker theory started spreading, whispered in diners and church basements. Some people said the Mothman didn't come to warn anyone. It came to make sure the disaster happened, that it had somehow caused the bridge to fall, through psychic power or technology or something nobody understood. They said it fed on death, on suffering, and it had been drawing power from Point Pleasant for 13 months, getting stronger, until it was strong enough to collapse a bridge. Others went even further. They believed the Mothman was extraterrestrial, connected to the UFO sightings. Part of some experiment or observation program run by beings from another world. The bridge collapse was the climax of that experiment. 46 people were the test subjects. Marcella Bennett, the woman who'd seen the Mothman up close back in November 1966, gave an interview to a local newspaper in early 1968. She said she'd thought about that night every day since the bridge fell. She said when the creature looked at her with those red eyes, it wasn't just looking, it was inside her mind, reading her, and what it wanted, she believed, was fear, pure terror. She said the Mothman had been feeding on the town's fear for 13 months, building up to something. And the bridge collapse was what it had been waiting for. The town turned on itself after that. People who'd reported Mothman sightings were harassed, called liars, told they were responsible for making Point Pleasant look like a town full of crazy people. Tourism dried up, businesses failed, people moved away. The ones who stayed didn't talk about the Mothman anymore. It became a forbidden subject, something shameful. John Keel received death threats, letters telling him to leave town, phone calls in the middle of the night, voices telling him he was making everything worse. He eventually left, but he never stopped believing that Point Pleasant had experienced something real, something that science couldn't explain. The local government wanted the whole story buried. They stopped responding to reporters' questions. They refused to comment on the Mothman. They focused on rebuilding, moving forward, forgetting. By 1968, the sightings had completely stopped. The TNT area was fenced off. The old generator plant was marked with no trespassing signs. Route 62 got more streetlights. The police stopped logging strange reports, and people stopped talking, but they didn't stop remembering. Parents warned their children never to go to the TNT area. Drivers still avoided certain stretches of road at night. And every December 15th, the town held a memorial service for the 46 people who died when the bridge fell. People gathered at the riverbank. They said prayers. They laid flowers. And some of them, the old ones who'd been there in 1966, looked across the dark water and wondered if somewhere out there, red eyes were watching them still. One more thing nobody could explain. In the months and years after the bridge collapse, several of the witnesses from 1966 and 1967 died. Car accidents that seemed too convenient. Heart attacks in people who'd been healthy. Suicides. Keel noted this in his research. He tried to find a pattern, but couldn't prove anything. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was stress from everything they'd been through. Or maybe something wanted them silenced. The biggest question remained unanswered. The question that kept people awake at night. The question that still haunts Point Pleasant today. Why did the Mothman sightings stop the exact moment the bridge fell? If it was just a bird or mass hysteria, why would it end so suddenly? If it was real, if it was something with purpose, what was that purpose? And where did it go when it was finished? With Point Pleasant? The Silver Bridge collapse changed America. It forced the government to look at every bridge in the country. In 1968, Congress passed the National Bridge Inspection Standards Act. Every bridge had to be inspected regularly. Engineers had to check for cracks, corrosion, metal fatigue. Bridges that failed inspection had to be repaired or closed. The law saved lives, prevented other disasters. But it came too late for the 46 people who died in the Ohio River. A new bridge was built to replace the Silver Bridge. It opened in 1969, just 2 years after the collapse. They called it the Silver Memorial Bridge. Stronger, safer, modern. People drive across it every day without thinking about what happened to the old bridge. But the families of the victims think about it every single day. As for the Mothman, officially it doesn't exist. No government agency ever investigated the sightings. No federal report ever mentioned it. The FBI looked into some of the strange phone calls that John Keel reported, but they closed the file without any conclusions. As far as the official record goes, the Mothman was mass hysteria, misidentified birds, overactive imaginations in a small town that got caught up in a story. But Point Pleasant never forgot. For 30 years, the Mothman was something people didn't talk about. Something shameful. A joke. But in 2003, something changed. The town decided to embrace its strange history instead of hiding from it. They built a statue in the center of town. 12 feet tall, made of shiny metal, a creature with wings spread wide and glowing red eyes. The Mothman statue. A museum opened next to the statue. The Mothman Museum. Inside are newspaper clippings from 1966 and 1967, photos of witnesses, maps of the TNT area, a timeline of sightings, models of the Silver Bridge, everything documented and preserved. Now, every September, Point Pleasant hosts the Mothman Festival. Thousands of people come from all over the country. They take pictures with the statue. They buy t-shirts and coffee mugs. They listen to speakers talk about the sightings. They tour the TNT area in buses. What was once a source of shame became a source of income. Point Pleasant is the Mothman town now, and they're okay with that. But if you talk to the older residents, the ones who were there in 1966, they'll tell you something different. They'll tell you the statue isn't a celebration. It's a warning, a reminder. They'll tell you the Mothman was real, that it came to their town for reasons nobody understands, and that it might come back. Marcella Bennett lived until 2014. In her final years, she gave one last interview to a documentary filmmaker. She was asked if she still believed in the Mothman after all these years. She didn't hesitate. She said, "I don't believe in it. I know it. I saw it with my own eyes. I felt what it wanted, and I know it's still out there somewhere." John Keel died in 2009. He never changed his mind about Point Pleasant. He wrote several more books about unexplained phenomena, but he always came back to the Mothman. In his last interviews, he said Point Pleasant was the most important case he ever investigated. He said something visited that town, something that exists in the spaces between what we know and what we can't explain. He said it would happen again. Maybe not in Point Pleasant, but somewhere. The TNT area is still there, still abandoned. The concrete domes are covered in graffiti now. The bunkers are filled with trash and broken bottles. The old generator plant where Roger and Linda first saw the Mothman is slowly collapsing. Trees grow through the roof, but people still go there. Ghost hunters, curious teenagers, believers. And they still report strange things. Lights that move through the trees at night. Shadows that don't match any object. Feelings of being watched. A few people claim they've seen red eyes in the darkness. The police don't take reports anymore. They just tell people to stay out of the TNT area. It's dangerous. The buildings are unstable. That's the official reason. But some of the older officers will tell you the real reason if you ask them quietly. They don't want people out there. They don't want the sightings to start again. Here's what we still don't know. We don't know why the Mothman came to Point Pleasant. Out of thousands of small towns in America, why that one? What was special about it? We don't know what the warnings meant. If the Mothman was trying to tell people about the bridge, why didn't it communicate more clearly? Why the dreams and the fear and the cryptic messages? We don't know why the sighting stopped exactly when the bridge fell. The correlation is too perfect to be coincidence, but nobody can explain the connection. Some researchers believe the Mothman appears before major disasters. They point to reports of similar creatures seen before Chernobyl in 1986, before the 9/11 attacks, before the tsunami that hit Japan in 2011. The descriptions match. Winged humanoids, glowing eyes, feelings of dread. None of these reports have been confirmed. None have been investigated officially. But the stories exist. Other people believe the Mothman is still in Point Pleasant, not visible anymore, but watching, waiting. They believe it comes and goes, that it's tied to the town somehow, that it will appear again when the next disaster is coming. And they scan the skies at night, looking for wings and red eyes. Some believe the Mothman never tried to warn anyone, that it was drawn to tragedy the way vultures circle dying animals, that it feeds on death and fear and chaos, that it came to Point Pleasant because it knew what was going to happen to the bridge, and it stayed to watch, to absorb the suffering. The scariest theory is the simplest. What if the Mothman made the bridge fall, not physically, but through some power we don't understand? Psychic energy, technology, magic. What if it chose Point Pleasant as a feeding ground and it needed a disaster to feed on? What if those 46 people died because something from outside our reality decided they should? We'll never know. The case is closed. The bridge is gone. Most of the witnesses are dead now. The few who remain are old, and their memories are fading. In another 20 years, there won't be anyone left who saw the Mothman firsthand. It will all be secondhand stories, legend, myth. But the statue will still be there, standing in the center of Point Pleasant, wings spread, eyes glowing red, and people will still ask the question that has no answer. Was the Mothman trying to save Point Pleasant? Or was it waiting for everyone to die? The truth is, we don't know if the Mothman was an omen or an executioner. We don't know if it tried to warn the town or if it orchestrated the tragedy. We don't know if it was a creature or a being or a force or a hallucination shared by hundreds of people. What we do know is this, is 13 months, more than 100 people saw something they couldn't explain, something that terrified them, something that appeared again and again near an old bridge. And then that bridge fell, and 46 people died, and the sighting stopped forever. That's not proof, but it's not nothing either. And late at night, when the streetlights flicker and the wind moves through the trees along the Ohio River, some people in Point Pleasant still look up at the sky, still listen for the sound of wings, still wonder if somewhere in the darkness, red eyes are watching, waiting, remembering. Because the most terrifying thing about the Mothman isn't what it was. It's that we still don't know if it's finished.